Meanwhile, opponents of President Trump are in fact succeeding in areas around the globe, including Canada. There's been this sort of bizarre divide that has emerged in some of the Trump supportive movement. And that divide is kind of tripartite. There are some of us in the Trump camp who are very upset that Mark Carney won the election in Canada because he is in fact a shill of the World Bank. He worked for the IMF. When you talk about like globalists, Mark Carney is sort of the definition of a globalist, meaning international institutions ought to rule the roost. Immigration ought to be relatively open. There ought to be commerce, not regulated by country or bilateral deals, but commerce with some of the worst places on earth, including places like China. Carney is very much in favor of regulation. He was a net zero guy. That guy's the prime minister now. So I think that it's quite bad on a personal level that President Trump intervened in the Canadian election by basically just crapping all over Canada repeatedly to no actual effect, by the way. Like, where's the big win? And so Carney got elected. I think that's bad. And then there's another wing of the Republican Party that says that basically Trump's activities had nothing to do with the victory of Mark Carney, which to me is just pretending or coping. I don't think that there's any argument that can plausibly be made that President Trump saying repeatedly that Canada was going to be the 51st state and then suggesting over and over that tariffs were going to force them to capitulate their sovereignty to the United States. Maybe we'd invade. That had no impact on the election whatsoever. That is not what the polls show. But there are some people in Team Trump land who are making the case that basically this is about Pierre Poilievre blowing it in some way, despite the fact that he was leading by 25 points in December. And then there's the third category of people who seem to be perversely happy that Mark Carney is the prime minister. And that group of people, a lot of those folks seem to be convinced that if there is a right-wing leader who's allied with principles of conservatives in the United States, but is not quote-unquote Trumpy enough, better to have a left-wing leader than somebody who is not, a Trump knockoff? It's a sort of bizarre perspective. I see people dunking on Pierre Poilievre. You're happy that ugly Justin Trudeau is going to be the prime minister over there? Well, if you think that Trump had nothing to do with the election, then I defy you to answer why exactly the new Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney thinks that Trump had a lot to do with the election. Here he was torching Trump at his victory rally.
Our old relationship with the United States, a relationship based on steadily increasing integration, is over. The system of open global trade, anchored by the United States, a system that Canada has relied on since the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped deliver prosperity for a country for decades, is over. These are tragedies, but it's also our new reality. We are over the shock of the American betrayal, but we should never forget the lessons. We have to look out for ourselves. And above all, we have to take care of each other. When I sit down with President Trump, it will be to discuss the future economic and security relationship between two sovereign nations. And it will be with our full knowledge that we have many, many other options than the United States to build prosperity for all Canadians.
Okay, so I have a question. Why is that better for the United States? Seriously, why is it better than Mark Carney is the Prime Minister of Canada? He's openly saying, by the way, that he wants to reorient away from the United States and toward Europe and China. So what's the upside? Seriously. We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, if you're a homeowner, you do need to listen to this. Did you know that somebody can literally steal your house? Yeah, it is real and it happens. Not like they come and they actually pick up your house physically. A scammer forges your signature on one document, uses a fake notary stamp, and spends about $40 to file it at the county recorder. Then they take out loans using your home as collateral. You won't even know it's happening until you start getting collection and foreclosure notices in the mail. Can you imagine if you or someone you cared about became a victim of these scams? That would be sad, frustrating, especially knowing there are people out there like Home Title Lock who can help keep an eye on your title. Most people never check on their home title once escrow closes. That's why it's critical to find out right now if you're already a victim by going to HometitleLock.com. They'll give you a free title history report and provide you with $1 million triple lock protection to help keep your home and equity safe. That's why I recommend and am proud to partner with Home Title Lock. Many people at the Daily Wire, including people on my team, trust Home Title Lock to protect what's likely one of their biggest assets. Again, if you're not protecting your home as an asset, what exactly are you protecting? You get 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts if there are any changes, and if fraud does happen, their US-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix the fraud and restore your title. When you go to HometitleLock.com right now and use promo code Shapiro, you can get a free 14-day trial and a title history report to find out if you're already a victim. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code Shapiro. Here he was, again, making the case that Trump is trying to break us so he can own us. It was this campaign slogan that basically allowed him to defeat Pierre Poilievre, who is in every way a better candidate. By the way, Poilievre's not going away. The Conservative Party actually won a larger percentage of the vote in Canada than they have at any time since 2011, when they last won the government. The big story of the election is not just that Carney won, it is that he also drew votes from a lot of the sort of fringe left-wing parties who consolidated around him in order to, quote-unquote, fight Trump. Here's Carney.
As I've been warning for months, America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country. Never. But these are not idle threats. President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never, ever happen.
Okay, so, by the way, the person who is saying that he basically lost the election for Poilievre is President Trump. This is one of the things I like about President Trump the most. He's totally transparent at all times. He did an interview with Jeffrey Goldberg. Again, don't do interviews with Jeffrey Goldberg. Jeffrey Goldberg is an absolute Barack Obama mouthpiece. He always was. He was a Joe Biden mouthpiece. He still is. I don't understand the deep desire by President Trump to reach out to, say, the New York Times or the Atlantic. In any case, he did an interview with Goldberg, and Goldberg asked him about Canada. And here's President Trump's answer, quote, "Well, the Canadians, here's the problem I have with Canada. We're subsidizing them to the tune of $200 billion a year." Okay, there I assume that he is talking about our trade deficit with Canada, which is largely based on their oil. If you take out the oil and gas from Canada, by the way, we do need that. We have refineries in the United States that are built for the kind of oil and natural gas that we import from Canada. Okay, but if you take that out, we actually have a trade surplus with Canada. In any case, Trump says, we don't need their gasoline, we don't need their oil, we don't need their lumber, we don't need their energy of any type. We don't need anything they have. I say it would make a great 51st state. I love other nations. I love Canada. I have great friends. Wayne Gretzky's a friend of mine. I have great friends. I said to Wayne, I'm going to give you a pass, Wayne. I don't want to ruin his reputation in Canada. I said, just pretend you don't know me, but they're great people. They know, they do 95% of their business with us. Remember, if they're a state, there's no tariffs. They have lower taxes. We have to guard them militarily. And then Goldberg says, you want them to become a state? And Trump says, I think it would be great. And then Trump added, quote, until I came along, remember, the conservative was leading by 25 points. Then I was disliked by enough of the Canadians that I've thrown the election into a close call, right? Okay, so President Trump knows that President Trump basically threw the election to Mark Carney. And my question is, how does that benefit President Trump? How does that benefit the United States? Mark Carney is openly saying he wants to reorient toward China. He literally is saying that. In that same speech, he said that he wanted to supercharge Canada's trade with Europe and Asia. Quote, the system of open global trade anchored by the United States, a system that Canada has relied on since the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped deliver prosperity for our countries for decades, is over. These are tragedies, but it's also our new reality. He is pledging closer integration with the European Union. He's also, presumably, going to be turning toward China. That is no shock. He is eager to turn toward China. So are many of the people on the left. President Trump, in revolutionary fashion during his first term, told the world, including the left, that China was a geopolitical opponent of the United States who needed to be treated that way. And large swaths of even the Democratic Party in the United States understand that. So that he deserves credit for. But if you're going to box in China, that requires a meticulously thought out strategy. And you know what would help is allies like Pierre Poilievre in power in Canada and not Mark Carney in Canada. Now, Carney is going to face some serious problems in Canada. Carney's economy, which again, he inherits from his own party, the Liberal Party, is really, really sluggish. If you look at the first year of the Trudeau government, 2016 through 2024, according to the Wall Street Journal, Canada's real GDP growth per capita was 2.5% versus 18.7% for the United States. And business investment per worker, excluding housing, actually fell between 2015 and 2023. So he's going to have to face down a lot of this stuff. But that does not mean that it is a good thing that he ends up as the actual Prime Minister of Canada when all this is said and done. It would be much better for the United States to have an ally in that position rather than somebody who hates President Trump. Poilievre liked Trump. Poilievre likes conservatives. The best case scenario at this point for conservatives in Canada is that the Liberal Party, which does not have an open majority in the parliament, they have to ally with some fringe parties in order to achieve a majority, that they govern poorly, the government falls within the next 24 months, and then Poilievre is prime minister. That is quite possible. However, this election was within grasp of people who were more conservative. And if you don't think it had anything to do with President Trump bashing the Canadians over the head, and then Canadians getting the wrong impression that Poilievre was allied with that bashing, I don't know what to tell you. And that is not a good thing. That is not a point of bragging. Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. Be sure to check out all of the other great content on my channel. I'll see you here next time.